Welcome to the Doggy Dutch Audio Stories, where weekly card readings open into reflections on manifestation, systems, sovereignty, and everyday life. Brought to you by the Etsy shop Alchemy of Me. The line is not the limit coloring book and the walking the universe ecosystem for manifestation. Episode 9.
Have you ever stood in front of a mirror to say your affirmations and noticed that the words didn't quite fit?
This episode is for such moments.
The story for today is titled, Looking in the Mirror.
Dutch has been reflecting on his social justice and manifestation oracle card pull.
A reading drawn using the thesis of us oracle cards for social justice.
Available from the Etsy shop Alchemy of Me.
The cards in the reading were Rediscover Abundance,
Reclaim Storytelling,
Remove Socialization,
and Re-emerge Whole.
Dutch has been letting the reading sit beside him
He has been carrying the cards quietly.
and noticing what reveals itself.
One morning, Dutch stood at his bathroom mirror. Around it, there were affirmations he intentionally drafted, words he believed in.
And as he stood there that morning, he began to read them.
I am abundant.
I am wealthy.
I am supplied.
But as he read, something in him paused.
The words felt different today than they had before.
They felt like a description. Like he was standing outside of something, looking in and trying to claim it from a distance.
And with that thought, a question arrived. What if the words in his affirmations were placing him on the outside of what he was speaking to?
Dutch had created those affirmations because he believed authorship mattered.
He believed he had a relationship with how he moved through his life.
Recently, Dutch had come to the conclusion that he would no longer narrate himself as broken inside systems that perpetuated limitation, scarcity, and lack.
So he had crafted affirmations to support him in this. But standing at the mirror that morning, Dutch began to wonder if some of those affirmations, however well-intentioned, had been quietly telling a story he no longer wanted to tell. A story that, without meaning to, recreated the same hierarchy he had been examining in systems.
A story that placed him beneath what he was speaking to. Over the past few months, Dutch had been sitting with an unfurling unease.
Because he had begun to see not only how systems tell stories, but the story systems told.
Stories that construct scarcity as personal failure.
Stories that take what systems produce, the financial strain, the limited access, and inherited disadvantage, and hand them back to people as their own fault.
Stories repeated so often, they stopped sounding like stories and started sounding like reality.
One thread, in particular, of that unfurling unease, which had been troubling Dutch, was the contrast between what manifestation teachings claimed to be telling him and the stories those teachings reinforced.
Dutch has been slowly noticing how whenever money is delayed, opportunity is blocked, or strain perseveres, spiritual teachings primarily place fault with the person, with their belief, their energy, their vibration. He was beginning to see how those teachings were replicating the same hierarchy found in systems.
Hierarchy that was created by erecting barriers, placing people beneath those barriers, and then asking them to prove themselves worthy of access.
That structure felt familiar. It felt like the same camouflage systems used to hide their own design.
The playbook was identical. Place people beneath, then ask them to prove themselves worthy of what is already theirs.
Dutch began to wonder if his affirmations had been placing him outside the gate too.
Not because that was his intention,
but because that is what socialization does.
Dutch was noticing something about grammar.
Grammar reveals posture.
And posture tells a story.
The story of whether you are inside the gate, or still trying to prove your way through it.
To Dutch's affirmation of I am abundant felt like describing a condition outside himself he hoped to access, language that placed him standing at the gate.
But I am abundance felt different.
It dissolved the gate.
I am wealthy felt like knocking.
But I am wealth felt like embodiment, a recognition of what he already was. No proof required.
Dutch felt his affirmation of I am supplied positioned him as waiting, as recipient, as dependent, as beneath, and as outside.
But I am supply positioned him as participant, as moving with, as part of, as inside. And that, he thought, was perhaps what rediscovering abundance had always meant. Not acquiring something new, but removing the idea that he had ever been outside it.
The more the distinction settled, the clearer something became to Dutch.
He did not want language that placed him outside the gate, or beneath what he was speaking to.
Even inside a practice he had chosen for himself.
Even at his own mirror.
For Dutch, an aspect of re-emerging whole was recognizing he was part of the creative force. He moved with it, not beneath it.
He was not separate from what he sought, and his affirmations needed to tell that story.
Not the story of someone standing outside abundance, looking in.
Not the story of someone waiting to qualify.
But the story of someone who had never been separate to begin with.
For Dutch, this was his refusal to stand beneath.
It was his refusal to quietly recreate hierarchy inside a practice that was supposed to support wholeness.
It was his refusal to spiritualize what was systemic and structural.
And it was his refusal to let systems escape accountability for the limitation, scarcity, and lack they produced.
For Dutch, reclaiming his affirmations was his way of refusing to narrate himself as broken inside systems.
Refusing to make every ordinary financial strain into evidence against him.
Refusing to let every pause become proof that something in him required fixing.
Refusing to let manifestation become another gate.
Dutch decided to revisit his affirmations using the Rest Journal, a coloring journey with empowering motivational statements, which he downloaded from the Etsy shop Alchemy of Me.
This, he thought, was what the reading had been pointing toward all along.
It pointed to rediscovering abundance by removing the separation between himself and what had never been absent.
It pointed to reclaiming storytelling by revising the unconscious and encoded stories his affirmations had been telling without his full awareness.
It pointed to removing socialization by refusing to recreate hierarchy inside his own practice.
And it pointed to re-emerging whole by stepping out from beneath and into participation.
Dutch knew this was just the beginning. The affirmations would keep evolving. He could already sense that.
But for now, standing at the mirror, he took down one note and replaced it.
The end. If something in this met you, take a breath with Dutch and let it simmer for a moment. Let's breathe in. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold together. 4, 3, 2, 1. And now we exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep noticing what reveals itself along the way. And remember, if you wanted your own readings, the Thesis of a Social Justice Oracle cards are available for print and immediate download at Alchemy of Me on Etsy.